Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I am James Boyd alongside my editor, Jim Aiello. I should say, real quick, Jim, that I am a tanner James Boyd than I was a couple days ago
Yeah.
after going down to Florida. So I'm back in town with all things NFL owners meetings related, I guess, behind me at this point. So excited to break it down with you here on the pod.
Yeah, you made good time, man. You're out in Palm Beach and then back. Yeah, you look good. Look like you refreshed, sitting by the pool, I'm sure, just the whole time, having Ballard come to you and yeah,
Yeah. I was like, oh,
Mai
they were,
Tai.
yeah, exactly. They were saying, oh, about talking at this time. I was like, oh, that doesn't really work for me. I'm going to be at the beach at this time. But no, I mean, every year I'm just amazed at the amount of wealth at these things for people who don't
Oh yeah.
understand. Like, they stayed at the Breakers Resort. And I believe when I looked it up, because I was just standing in the lobby of the place, I was like, let me just look up how much it costs to stay here tonight. And the funniest thing about it is, Jim, the first of all, the cheapest room you could get is a suite. There is no like,
Yeah, there's no
king and a double queen bed.
no
Like,
base
no.
level.
And I think the cheapest room I saw was like 1,400 a night, which was, something. And I'm trust me,
Thank you
they
for
these people
yeah.
weren't staying in those suites. So, yeah, Jim, just bring your kids down next time and let them run amongst the rest of the kids who don't realize that having the Atlantic Ocean in the back of your hotel is not the same as the Holiday Inn in the pool. So, yeah, that was cool. We could talk all about that and other things. Saw Serena Williams, and I said excuse me to Serena
Really?
Williams. Yes, Jim, that was crazy.
Nice. That's
Um,
awesome.
did not know that was her because I just didn't expect her to see her there, and that was like I've been starstruck many times in my life because usually I'm like expecting to see like LeBron last week at a Pacers game or
Right.
seeing Patrick Mahomes down the tunnel or whatever when the Colts played him a couple years ago, things like that. I'm kind of preparing for it. But no joke, I was this woman in front of me looked like Serena Williams. I was like, oh, it looks like Serena Williams. And I said, excuse me, and it was Serena Williams. I was like, whoa, okay, wow, that's different.
Yeah, that
So
is yeah, one of the greatest athletes of like her generation, maybe ever, probably
yeah,
athletes ever. Definitely one of the, I mean, probably the greatest tennis player of all time.
yeah.
At least,
So
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that
that's
was
that's awesome.
that was crazy. But obviously,
Very cool.
I did not go there for Serena Williams, although I'm
No,
not opposed to it. But I went there to talk to Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. Jim Irsay did not talk for a second straight year. Hopefully, we'll
yeah,
hear from him again before the season starts up. Last year, we heard from him in camp. So I do believe at some point we'll get him this offseason. But just to kind of debrief, we'll start with Ballard and Steichen. And I know I was slacking you and texting you and calling you about everything that kind of went down. And we put out, two stories. I hope you all checked
yep,
out. But a lot of ground to cover, I would say, with those two.
yeah. So let me jump in with my first question here because
Let's
I was
go.
reading and editing your content and story and posting it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds a little different than what James had been saying for the past month, and
Oh, yeah.
so I'm curious as to where you are right now. Is after having spoken in person with a limited group, which is nice. It seemed like it was kind of a small group talking to Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. So you kind of actually got to see their facial reactions and kind of be like engaged with them and see how they are, which I like. You are buying the quarterback competition a little bit more, it seems to be. Like, it seems like you're like, okay, this actually might be, because I know a month ago, you were like, this thing is kind of, not a month ago, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. It feels like a month ago when they signed Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
But when they signed Daniel Jones, you were like, yeah, it's a competition, quote unquote, but they're going to let Anthony Richardson win. They want him to win. He's going to be it. It seems like you're maybe turning a little bit on that and saying it's going to be more of a competition than you thought. Or am I reading it wrong? Or am I
Oh
reading it
no,
wrong?
no, you are reading it correctly, which is why you're my
Okay.
editor. I am drinking the Kool-Aid a bit more than I
Okay.
was
Okay.
because I think just the general reaction, I thought that, all of us, me, Stephen Holder, Joel Erickson, even JJ Stankovitz, the team reporter, like just asking questions about this competition, um, it seemed more and more legit. I believe I asked Shane, hey, you all preached for, better part of 2 years. Anthony needs reps to get better. So how does splitting the reps help him? And Shane's response was, and I quote, I think that's part of the process right now that we're going through, the competition. He's going to have to take advantage of the reps that he gets. It's a competition, and competition makes everyone better. I was like, dang, like, all
I
right,
was
like,
I read that as like deal with it. Like, you know what, man? Like you had your chance for 2 years. Like
absolutely. And again,
yeah.
Chris Ballard echoed the same things, the same
Yeah.
exact things. And so that was alarming to me. I thought when Chris Ballard said, you know, just because I'll actually just read what he said because to me, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really kind of telling as well. Whatever the outcome of this competition is for Anthony, does it mean it's the end? No, it doesn't. I've said all along. I've said that all along. It doesn't mean we're quitting on him either. Everybody's developmental timeline is a little bit different. Whatever the outcome is for Anthony does not mean it's the end. No, it doesn't. I've said it all along, and I'm like, okay, like, but it is though. That's what I wanted to say in
Okay.
the moment. I'm not rude. I'm not, like people are always like, in the moment, get Ballard and call him on this and call him on that. And so we definitely had our moments of like, going head to head there in our little scrum off to the side, Jim. That was pretty funny. I'll get into a little bit of that and what I disagree with him on specifically. But that was one where I was like, yes and no. Like you do have to make a decision on his fifth year option as a first round pick at the end of next year, which
Yeah.
no one's picking that up if you don't believe he's going to be your future quarterback, and
Right.
and you're going to pay him a lot more money because of that. So, again, Jim, I am. I was down with the palm trees. I'm swaying a little bit with the palms. So I was just like, "Whoo, man! Like this is." It feels like a legit competition. And credit to the Colts because they told us that from day one. But to me, I was like, "Wow!" It sounds like they could actually move on from Anthony before the start of next season, which to me just would be unfathomable and still pretty wild. But just reading the tea leaves, hopefully correctly, it sounds like this is legit competition. And Anthony has to he really has to go out there and win it and not just, be okay in training camp. Like, no, it sounds like it, I believe I was asked this as well. It might have been from KB. Like, if it's 51% Jones or 49% Anthony, like, who would it be? And I'm like, I mean, they're talking and acting as if whoever's better is gonna win. And I want to know your reaction to. I mean, you covered the Colts. You kind of seen this bird's eye view, and I like to get your perspective. Sometimes I feel like I'm in it so much, but when Steven asked, Chris Ballard, "Hey, is the best case scenario that
Yeah.
Anthony does win the job, and he's your long term answer? Is that the best scenario?" And he was like, "Well, the best scenario is that we win games, no matter who the
Yeah.
quarterback is." And I was like, "Wow, okay." Like, and again, what else are you supposed to say when you bring in Daniel Jones? You're paying $14 million, but
Yeah.
I was just like, it seems like, hey, we know the limitations with Daniel Jones, but if this guy can win us 10 games and AR can only win us 8 games, then or we believe that might be the case. I'm not saying that's what they believe. I'm just saying in a hypothetical, we're going to go with the guy who, by default, no matter how it looks, who he is, reps, all that, whatever, we're going to go with the guy who we believe gives us the best chance to win, barring upside, barring long term future, barring plan, whatever. We want to win the most games possible. And if that's just one more game with this guy versus the next guy, it doesn't matter. So, what was your reaction to, I mean, that part of it? Because again, I can only imagine your eyes when you read my stuff, and it's like, oh, like a little different.
Yeah, it was. That was my first reaction was being like, "Oh, they got James to buy in. This is interesting." So like I here's what I have to say. I still think that Anthony Richardson is the week 1 starter. I still believe that. I think they're doing the best job they possibly can of of making sure that Anthony Richardson doesn't believe for a second that he has that locked up.
That's
That
fair.
he has it's sewn up that like, yeah, it's competition, but I'm gonna win it. They don't want him to believe that with any part of his being. They want to coax whatever competitive juices are in him. And again, he's competitive, but we also had reason to come to question some of those competitive juices last year based on the tap out and some other things. So
And that's one thing,
they're
real
going to try to
quick. Chris
go ahead.
Ballard vehemently pushed back on when we talked about just how Anthony's season went. He was like, "Hey,
Yeah,
I never questioned that kid's competitive nature." And all along, I mean, he said he didn't really address it too much at the owners' meetings, like the tap out and all this stuff. He more or
yeah,
less was just saying like anything that you perceive as Anthony maybe not being as focused was just him being a little naive, which I believe has been
yeah.
uniform with what they said. So he said he believes he's a competitor. But to your point, I kind of agree, Jim. You know, it's kind of how it is with any team you're on. Do you love it enough to commit to it outside of like game days and practice when you're like doing live reps? And so I'll
For
let you
sure.
continue, but I just want to make that clear,
No,
just to kind of clarify a little bit.
it's a fair point. Maybe it didn't have to do with his competitiveness, though. and definitely had more to do with him being naive. Though I think that there's a certain level of competitor that just wouldn't ever come off the field no matter what.
Fair,
So
fair.
maybe, and I truly believe that's the kind of player that Anthony Richardson is aiming to become and can become. I don't have to restate my bona fides on being an Anthony Richardson believer. I still believe he's going to figure this thing out. However, they are doing the best thing possible for him, which is essentially saying we're not handing it to you. We're not going to give it to you. We're not going to, and we're bringing in somebody who can realistically take it from you. Which again, some Colts fans may scoff at, NFL fans may scoff at. It's Daniel Jones, but when Daniel Jones is playing well, he's a perfectly fine NFL quarterback. It's not like the most exciting thing in the world, but
Right,
we
right.
know that Anthony Richardson has struggled to be a perfectly fine NFL quarterback, and we've at least seen it with Daniel Jones. So again, I believe that Richardson will be the starter week 1, but I believe that the Colts are doing the exact right thing by trying to convince him that it's not it's not a
Oh, let me
handout.
let me ask you why do you think that is? I guess to kind of draw that line in the sand as early as the combine when they announced the
Yeah.
competition, and
Yeah.
to like double down it so much leading up to what is a pivotal year 3 for Anthony.
Yeah, again, I think they have to convince him. But why do wait, are you asking why I think he's going to be the week 1 starter or
No,
why
no,
I
no.
think they're doing this?
Why they're being so like not,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's like a 180, but they're this is a different feel than last year, and
Yeah.
even I would say toward the middle of last season when Anthony kind of reemerged from the bench. The season ended, and then it was like boom, we got to get competition in here. And so I guess why do you think that is?
Because he hasn't earned it. He hasn't earned anything. Honestly, he hasn't earned the right to be the face of the franchise,
That's
to be the
fair.
starter, to be anything. He hasn't proved one that he can stay healthy. That's like a separate question in some ways, but like
Yeah.
he has to prove that too. And they had to have insurance policy for him, and they had to have a good one if they want to save their jobs and win games next year. So that was already kind of a thing. Like you could have already told me that they needed to sign a guy like Daniel Jones, even if they thought Anthony Richardson was the face of the franchise, just because you need to have a bona fide starter who can play in case Richardson gets hurt, which he has constantly throughout his career. But
Right.
then you add in all the other stuff, the lack of preparation, some of the other things that they didn't like about him last year, the lack of essentially pushing himself to go beyond what is required, I guess, to play quarterback in the NFL. And then, yeah, you definitely need to add. He hasn't earned it. He hasn't earned it. I believe that he
That's
can
fair.
and will, but he hasn't earned it. And I think the Colts are saying that, which is true. They are saying he hasn't earned it. They are saying he hasn't proved it, and therefore you got 2 years to prove it and show it. You couldn't do it, and now this is the NFL. This is reality. We've brought in your replacement or your potential replacement.
Yeah, and you know what was fascinating to me, and so when we go to for the listeners who might not understand, when we go to the owners' meetings or the combine or even like the draft, places where you might run into a lot of different media figures, whether it's reporters or even team execs, things like that. The
Hmm.
chatter, at least among my peers, just with my other reporter friends at the Athletic and other places, man, a lot of people were intrigued by this competition. Not
Yeah,
because they think it's like, oh, two great quarterbacks. It's like,
yeah,
slim pickings type of thing. But
sure.
it is a storyline. It is a national storyline. And I think that's what I want to drive home here. It's not that I care what like the national people think all the time, but
No,
I think it became the magnitude of the story. And maybe that's because of the New York ties with Daniel Jones. It's like, wow, like a lot of people are just, at least mildly curious as to what's going to happen in Indy. And a lot of the questions that I got asked, Jim, was like, how did you even get to this point? Like, where did they go wrong? And there's just so many layers to the
the,
Anthony Richardson experience. Seriously,
yeah.
I mean,
It's a long answer to that. Honestly, yeah,
yeah, I go back to his rookie year, which I thought was very promising. Like those first four games before he got hurt with
yeah,
the shoulder. I know he missed one extra game with the concussion, but before he was out for the season, we were all like, man, like this dude is his floor is higher than we thought, and he's making plays, and oh man, the future's bright in Indy. Then the shoulder happens, and we haven't really seen that level of Anthony since then. I mean, outside of the Jets game this past season, oh, he had the drive against the Patriots, but overall that game wasn't really good. He hasn't had too many high moments,
no.
and so I you can never go back and change things, but I just wonder, like, you know, man, should they have played him as soon as they did? I know Ballard told our Jim Trotter, who's not retired, at the end of last season or during the bye week last season, oh, should I have played him right away? Then I
Yeah,
think, man, what if Anthony never got hurt? Then I'm also thinking, like, okay, well, what if they didn't take the gamble on him? Like, I mean, it's all these things, but you can't go back and change any of it. At this point, you're going into a pivotal, did I say pivotal? Um, year 3, Jim, where there's so much riding on this guy. and
Yeah.
all eyes are on him, even more so than before.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every casual fan cares about who's starting at quarterback for every team in the league. It doesn't matter. It's always a, we can follow different storylines, different teams, get into the trenches, and we'll talk about the Colts and right guard issues. But like the general fan wants to know who's starting at quarterback, and we don't know that answer right now. And I feel like this is something that could be drawn out throughout the offseason. I believe that even the preseason games, Jim, will be more juiced up because of this.
I'm actually look. I was thinking about that. I was looking forward to that the most because most of the time preseason is dreadful and I hate watching it. And this year there will be stakes, and we're going to see. I think a lot of Daniel Jones and a lot of Anthony Richardson trying to prove themselves and separate themselves in this competition. So that will be very exciting. It's yeah, it's funny that you say that. Now I wonder about we think about the Anthony Richardson background of like just essentially just the athletic freak and being to doing the freakiest quarterback that's ever showed up at the NFL Combine really,
Right.
and then he comes in, and I wouldn't say he had like incredible success his rookie year, but he had immediate success. And part
He
of me
did.
wonders too, yeah, part of me wonders too, like now that we know a little bit more about him and his psyche a little, I would say. Obviously, we don't really know the person that well, but like I do wonder if that immediate success was a detriment to him in a way. Like he maybe thought, oh, I once again can get by on natural talent and physical ability because that's kind of what I've done my whole career is that he's been physically more capable than pretty much anybody else on the field throughout high school and throughout college. And so I do wonder if he came out, with the Colts in some ways good. There's that confidence that he's going to be successful, but in some ways bad. Like, hey, I got this because I'm me and I've always done this. And then
Exactly.
year two came and he felt he faced some adversity, and that wasn't easy for him to overcome. And I don't again like he didn't work to in the way that the Colts wanted for him to overcome it in that way. I think there was maybe a lot of hope that the natural ability would be what saved him, and obviously
Yeah.
that's not going to be enough for the NFL. It never is.
And the other thing I would even point out too, and and trust me, I hate saying this as a reporter because it's like do your job, get the answers, but hopefully I can get the answers someday.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how extensive was the surgery?
yeah.
Because I always
Good
wonder
question
that
too.
people miss time, and Anthony's injury was pretty unique. And from what I've heard behind the scenes, which is not like official reporting, it wasn't just a typical type of recovery, a typical injury. I know we hear about ACLs and Achilles all the time, and it's pretty well documented how to, correct that. But when it's your throwing shoulder, AC joint, having things, tighten, having some metal put in there, like all these things,
Yeah,
like how hard was it to work on your game or to get back to a certain level where you can throw with high velocity and no pain and things like that going into a big year two? And so I just wonder,
it's a
if we'll
great
ever
point.
get that answer. Just, because it's always like that with guys. And I hate to be that way, but in a sense, you kind of have to. Even teams have to be that way. Like, for example, Samson Ebukam goes down, tears his Achilles. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I'll see you next year. And then next year comes, and I'll grade you off of what I see from you. I'm not thinking of the days we have to kind of figure out how to walk again, how to bend your toes, how to flex your like
Yep.
foot, all these things. And so I would love to know, okay, how hard was it? Because it's not as simple as us just fast forwarding a couple months, like it kind of tends to be from afar. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
Anthony's back, he's throwing again. Oh, he looks great, So again, that is what the overarching conversations were when people asked me about him was just, how did you get here and where do you go from here? And that's the other part of it is like, you know, I don't want to say nightmare scenario, but the scenario that would really kind of put this franchise in a weird position is if Anthony doesn't win the starting job, Daniel
Hmm.
Jones takes the job, takes you to the playoffs, and then you get smoked in the first round or you get smoked, whatever. Like, so let's say you win 10 games with Daniel Jones, you make the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. Do you bring him back? Like, do you move on? Do you draft? Like, I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
questions that come out of this season.
It's an unanswerable question,
And
but
I
yeah, I know
know,
what you mean.
but it's just like, but that's the thing. You start one question and you get to the, because, and it all goes back to they haven't figured it out at quarterback. And that's what's holding this franchise back. And so
Yeah.
that dominated the conversation a lot with Chris Ballard, with Shane Steichen. The listeners get a kick out of this. For those who watched the YouTube video of Shane talking at the owners' meetings, the first question was not from one of us on the beat. It was a guy asking about Grant Stewart, who got 4 questions about him. He is loved already in Detroit, for those wondering. I know he's loved here in Indianapolis as well. But I mean, outside of Grant Stewart, the number one topic was, Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson and where they can go from there. Yeah, that was interesting to me. And I thought also, Jim, asking Shane and Chris what stood out about Daniel Jones, they mentioned efficiency as a passer. And your thoughts on that? Because I thought that was very not very telling, but a mark that is definitely in Daniel Jones's favor right now.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Daniel Jones over the last couple of years. Obviously, doing being the editor of the Giants beat as well. Yeah, he can be an efficient passer. He's a more accurate passer than Anthony Richardson is right now. Like very clearly, that's stating the obvious. I think the major issue with him, and they both said it, and that's gonna be a problem in the Shane Steichen offense. I think is that he won't push the ball down the field. They talked a lot about that last offseason. The Giants were like, we're gonna try to get Daniel to really push it downfield. We want him to take shots downfield to draft some league neighbors. A guy who isn't solely a downfield threat, obviously, but they thought with him and Darius Slayton they could really create some explosive plays, and they didn't. They just couldn't. A lot of that had to do with Daniel Jones. I think got some of the aggression coached out of him at an early age. He fumbled a lot. He threw some picks. Coaches were like, need to protect the ball better, and he kind of went too far the other direction. So I think that's kind of the issue with Daniel Jones right now. But the upside is that he can be an accurate short to intermediate passer and can get into a rhythm and hits his targets more cleanly and more consistently than you see Anthony Richardson do it. And that can work in a Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen, again, he's had some issues as a head coach, but as an offensive play caller and play designer, I still think he's one of the better ones in the NFL. And there have been plenty of times where we've seen Anthony Richardson miss just like a wide open receiver. Daniel Jones really won't do that as often. He's going to hit the open receivers if you give him easy reads, especially first read, and he's going to hit it. So definitely, I think already has that advantage on Anthony Richardson, and definitely understand why the Colts were interested in that. And I think Chris Ballard even said to you, and maybe it was your question, but um, they like the fact that he can be a runner. They like that they won't have to change the offense too much. So there's
Right,
that too.
right. So I mean, that's where we stand. I tend to think like, wow, this is a legit competition. They weren't lying to me, which is always appreciated. But the reason why I'm even skeptical in the beginning, Jim, seriously,
Yeah,
is because for the better part of a year and a half, you told us Anthony was this very hard worker. He was, doing all the stuff, and then you benched him because he wasn't working hard enough. And so there, that trust there. I'm like, man, the messaging. I have to see the actions behind it. And I still feel that way about so many things regarding this franchise because I'm like, you guys told us he was the guy. He's a franchise
yep,
quarterback. We believe in him. He works hard. He has all the intangibles. And then the intangibles are, to a certain extent, what have held him back. And
right. It's
so,
part of it. Yeah,
yeah, I'm very excited to see, how he responds. And we'll find out pretty soon here. I looked it up. I believe April 21st is when the Colts can start OTAs. I know some of you might be thinking, oh, they can start sooner. That's if you have a new coach. And
yeah.
so the
New coaches get
Bears
to
will
start a
like
little
start,
sooner.
sooner with Ben Johnson, but like they have to start a little bit later. But that is like when the official start date of seeing Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson on the field, like publicly, will begin. And that'll be a sight to see because we know it's different. The last point I want to make on this is I asked Chris Ballard, hey, is this competition different than the one Anthony had when he was a rookie? Because he's not a rookie anymore. He's going into year 3.
Yeah,
And, the plan isn't just to ultimately give him the job. I think his rookie year was kind of like, are we going to sit him for a little while? Is Gardner going to be the guy? But we all knew Anthony's going to be the guy eventually. Not the case anymore. And he said, more or less yes and no, and that everybody's timeline looks different. And then I thought it was interesting here, Jim. I would love to hear your thoughts on this because I think we're on the same page, but I mean, I also like arguing, so I'm not opposed to, you disagreeing. But every time Chris Ballard mentions Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and their
yeah.
redemption stories,
Hmm.
I am just like, I know they didn't have these redemption arcs with their current team. I mean, he was the one that pointed out that Baker Mayfield went from Cleveland to Carolina to the Rams. I forgot he beat the Rams. Oh no, he was with the Rams. They beat the Raiders in like one day of prep, which is hilarious because that's the
Yeah,
most Raiders thing ever. Then now at Tampa Bay, he's like $100 million quarterback again. And obviously we see what's happened with Sam Darnold. But
yeah.
I mean, How does that relate to Anthony?
I think it's okay. So I think the answer, I think, I wasn't there. I think the answer was essentially to say that the development, quarterback development, it takes different shapes and different
Oh
forms.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was definitely
And
his
some
point that he was making. Yes.
and some guys take a little longer for it to happen with. And I do think that there is something to be said for what lessons can we learn from the Baker Mayfield Sam Darnold thing, and it's not giving up too soon. It's not quitting too early and thinking that what we saw is all he has. Like now, there's again, you could parse a lot of this with Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to get into all of that, but I think his point was essentially to say that that progress isn't linear, right? You can't measure it the same
It's
way for
not.
everybody. I mean, you and I were talking on the phone the other day. I think another interesting comparison is like Bryce Young. Look at this draft class: Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, and even Will Levis. But we'll just do the top three. Like Bryce Young was left for dead after his first season, and then was pretty much benched early on, and they were going to let Andy Dalton start until he got into a car accident and hurt his hand. Like, and then all of a sudden it was great for Bryce Young. He looked really, really good down the stretch. Bryce Young, I'm sorry, C.J. Stroud looked like the savior of the NFL, like the guy who was going to challenge Patrick Mahomes and all that stuff in the year one and year two. Whew, not so good. It was again not all his fault or any of that stuff, but
Right.
you just
But
see like
still.
these things fluctuate. It's not bad for Young, then it's back up, and it's great for Stroud, and it's back down. And we said year one for Richardson was good, and then year two is down. Like maybe year three will be back up. Like it's. I think his point was just to say that these things are so reliant on surroundings and different environments and a lot of things that are outside of their control that it's tough to know. But again, you're right that the examples that he cited are interesting in that these guys had success away from the cities that drafted them. But I think and I hope, at least for his sake, that he's not already writing Richardson off and saying he's going to have to go have success somewhere else.
Absolutely. And again, this is so layered to me and so fascinating. And I keep saying last thing, but this is really my last thing on the quarterbacks. I thought, I asked Chris your question, Jim, which was, and credit to the editor, man. I'm telling y'all, look, if you, I would recommend, I'm gonna get in my soapbox right now. I believe that we need life editors, seriously, because I'm like, man, having somebody else to kind of give you that perspective is great. And so I tie it back to the Colts in football. I was like, hey, do you think that Daniel can offer, whether he wins the job or not, can offer Anthony some perspective that others can't because he's been in his shoes before. He's been a top 10 pick. He's been a franchise quarterback. It hasn't worked out for him. He also has some of the same skill set traits. And Chris, his response was pretty, it was real, but he was like, you know what? I hadn't thought about it like that. But yeah, he probably could offer him something that others couldn't. Like Joe Flacco couldn't really relate to
No,
those types of
yeah,
pressures, and being even closer in age and things like that, maybe it might help. So that was one that kind of stopped Chris Bell. I don't want to say he was like thrown off or like, but
no,
he was
yeah,
definitely like, you know what? That is a good point, and maybe that will help. And it also leads to the whole my biggest takeaway, not even biggest takeaway, one of the biggest quotes that I had stuck in my brain after I left the sit down was, they don't have to be best friends.
right, right.
There's
I like that
respect,
one.
and then that's one thing that he was very happy about. He was like, I trust Anthony's character. Like as a person, I know football character is like another thing. Like, oh, does he work hard? All those things. Um, he said that he trusts their character as men to still be good teammates no matter what happens, and because of that, he believes that this will be a pretty interesting, position battle, but something where they're not just being hateful towards each other, or if this guy wins, I'm gonna have a cold shoulder towards the next guy. There's
Yeah,
gonna be mutual respect, but they don't have to be best friends line was needed, and honestly, it was obvious because I was like, I don't expect these guys to be best friends just because of the stakes of what's happening. And I mean, we can all try to spin it how we want to. Oh, we're a team, kumbaya, and they are. But Daniel Jones came here to take your job.
yeah,
That's the reality of it. Anybody trying to take your job isn't going to be your best friend, and so I'm curious to see how that dynamic and how that dialogue kind of just shapes itself and morphs over time, no matter who wins it. So we'll see, we'll see. But similar to this podcast, we're 28 minutes in. I believe Ballard was 20 minutes in. We finally got to a different topic. He's like, "Oh, we have a defense. We have other players." And, which was fair. We kind of bombarded him with a
yeah.
lot of
Well,
questions
it's
about
still the
that.
most important position, quarterback. So yeah.
Yeah, but a couple of things stood out regarding the rest of the team, and I guess I'll start with, I guess the more timely thing, which would be like the draft coming up, and the tight ends, Jim. Again, I didn't ask, hey, are you going to draft a tight end? This is one of the last questions I asked him. But he said this is Ballard himself. He mentioned Jack Doyle and said they needed like game changers. He likes the guys that they have, but this wasn't the typical. We like our guys. It was like we like our guys if they're not going to be the guy, you know. And so, the quote that sends out from that is, you know, do we need a game changer? Absolutely, we do. Will it happen? I can't dictate the draft. And I was like, So I don't know if you're a betting man, Jim, but I would assume before this they would bet on them drafting a tight end, but it sounds like that has been top of mind for Chris Ballard. I don't know if it's like a Freudian slip or something like that, if it's that big of a deal, but it definitely was something that kind of piqued my interest a little bit, just because I mean that's as flat as he's kind of come to saying we need a guy, and again in years past they haven't really said that. It's always been, oh, we got a collection of talent. We can kind of make it work. We like a guy, yeah, but we got some guys. Nuh-uh. I left that thinking they're going to draft a tight end relatively high.
I mean, listen, if we've learned anything from Chris Ballard this offseason, it's he's telling you the truth most of the time, right? Like he's talking. He said he was going to be different in free agency. He was different. He said he's going to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson. He's done it. Now it's funny that you said that though, because as soon as you said they need a difference maker, it reminded me of sitting on a Zoom interview with Jim Irsay in February, right after the Super Bowl or right before the Super Bowl. I can't remember. And I just pulled up the quote because I had found it. We asked about getting weapons for the Colts, and his response was, "I think we need one or two big playmakers, a tight end or wide receiver. I think we have a real interesting mix there. It's amazing when you see 87 and 10 for Kansas City and the things they're doing and that sort of thing. It's remarkable. I think again we're offensively looking for a couple playmakers." That was 4 years ago. It was four off seasons ago. Their tight end splurges in that market have not been so good, and their draft picks have not been so good. Now, to be fair, they've done some work at wide receiver since then, so don't want to knock them too much. They haven't found Tyreek Hill, but they haven't even come close to finding their Travis Kelsey. So I this is one where I want to see, yeah, put your money where your mouth is. And as you have heard me suggest, I don't think it has to be in the draft. I think I think there are some interesting trade targets out there that they could
Yes,
add.
yes.
But that also could come during the draft. So if you're the Colts or Chris Ballard and you are sitting there, you want Tyler Warren, you want Colston Loveland, and they don't fall to you at 14, or you don't love the value there, maybe on Loveland at 14 or something like that. That might be the time you do call up the Eagles or the Ravens or the Raiders and say, "Hey, we got a pick coming up later in the fourth round. Would you be interested in you know what I mean?" So you can make that kind of trade during the draft or even after, maybe not after the draft, because you don't want to. Again, I think teams are less interested in subtracting from their current rosters and getting
Right,
future
right,
picks.
right.
So, but it does sound to kind of circle back to your point, like they are like Chris Ballard is interested in adding somebody who can be a difference maker. I think he'd prefer the draft, but I do think that there are other options for him in this scenario, which is tricky, I will say, because I think he still wants to do it young, and there's a deep tight end class. So I could definitely see him taking like a second or third round tight end, and then maybe still trying to pull off a trade, something like that. I don't know. I want to see him attack the position in a way that he hasn't before. And he's done things he hasn't done before this offseason, so I'll give him the credit for that. But he hasn't really attacked tight end in a while, and in a significant way. And so now it's time. It's certainly time. I don't think it has to be the first round pick, but man, every friggin' mock draft that you come across these days is either Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren. It's kind of insane. Everyone sees it.
Exactly. And so I was like, all right. And typical Ballard, he tells us, uh, yeah, I bet you guys wish you could see our actual board. And I'm like, yes, yes, I wish I could. So if you want to leak anything to me, I would greatly appreciate it. But yes, the tight end position, to hear him talk that definitively about it, I was like, okay, this is top of mind. And again, it kind of, to your point, Jim, encapsulates the entire offseason and maybe just a different approach from Ballard in general,
Yeah, it could
trying
be.
to build a winner. So I'm very excited to just hear, more about that and obviously just see the results of it, because he, as much as I don't want to make like an excuse for Ballard, but when it comes to the draft, he's right. Picking 14 is a lot different than picking 4 a couple years ago when you kind of knew, okay, Anthony's probably going to be there. You didn't know it for certain, but you had a good inkling of that. Whereas with 14, anything could happen between 14 and
And
1.
And I do think he was, again, this is just my guess, but we know that he was interested in moving up last year. I
Right.
still
Yep.
believe that was for a tight end, but I don't, for Brock Bowers. It could have been a receiver or something. It could have been something else. We don't know. We just know that he called, I believe it was the Giants, right, with an offer to
Mm-hmm.
try to move up in that draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so that does show some aggression, some level of aggression, not enough, obviously, to get it done, but some level of aggression
Mm-hmm.
to go get your guy. So maybe he will show a little bit more aggression, or maybe he will just hope the board falls the way. Because I think like you go back last year, I'm not sure like they went into the draft hoping they ended up with like Atu Latu. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Right.
know that they were hoping to add like a pass rusher at that spot. I think they were happy they did.
Yeah,
He
they
he
were
was
very
he
happy.
was yeah, I was to say he was chuckling to himself. He got the best pass rusher in the draft, like which is great. I think it's a premium position, and they drafted the first one, so that's I think they felt fortunate or lucky to have been able to do that. But I'm not sure that was the target going in. It seemed like maybe they were targeting a playmaker, and I think some of his quotes around the draft last year suggested that as well. So I would not be surprised if he doesn't, like maybe this segues into the next part of the conversation. He learned that mistake. They didn't necessarily go after Daniil Hunter. If they didn't finish the job with Daniil Hunter, they made sure they didn't make that mistake this year with Charvarius Ward. Maybe we see a similar situation with, okay, let's go get our tight end. The guy, if we believe Tyler Warren is the guy, let's not hope. Let's just go get it. So it could be.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off that, we've seen that so far with Javarius Ward, with Cam
Yep.
Bynum in that defense. And I thought
Yep.
Chris Ballard, he didn't go too much on Javarius Ward. He kind of kept it close to the vest, but I was thinking money must have been a great motivator to get that deal done. I can't imagine anything else. I mean, it isn't like Travarius Ward has like character issues or
No.
injury, crazy injury history. Like we all know, he went through a very tragic time last year with loss of his daughter. Had a couple of knickknacks injury wise, but that was the biggest reason I believe from him saying it, others saying it, that he kind of just wasn't himself last year, understandably so. But they were super high on him, and a lot of teams
Yeah.
were. I mean, one of them was the Saints. Ballard would not confirm or deny that, but thank God for Mooney Ward, because Travarius and Mooney Ward told us on the radio. So, I mean, Jim,
I
that was different and definitive for him.
I was just gonna to support your point. It had to be money because the guy almost signed with essentially his hometown team. We grew up what like how far
Two
away
hours away,
from
I think, from Louisiana is what he
from
said.
yeah, he's Mississippi, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like, but
So
he was like, he said he's 2 hours away from like the Saints Stadium, I believe. So it's
right.
pretty close.
So I mean, I think he was pretty close to going to play at home, quote unquote, pretty close to home,
Yep.
and for a good amount of money. So I mean, I think to sway him to from playing close to home, Chris Ballard really had to step up. That's my guess. Obviously, we don't know for
Look,
sure, but
35 M's guaranteed is will sway anybody, as far as loyalty goes. And so
yeah,
that was, and then the good thing about being at these meetings, I got a chance to go talk to Kyle Shanahan. I was like, hey, what are the Colts getting in Javarius Ward? And just raved about him. Hey, I loved him. Great player. Believe he's gonna, do some big things there. And then he said the way he handled himself, and I'm paraphrasing, but he really praised Javarius for how he handled himself throughout a really tough season, and said that he gained a ton of respect for him because of how he carried himself. So much respect to that. Actually, I'll read you the quote verbatim. I said, hey, what are the Colts getting in Javarius Ward? He said, they're getting a hell of a player. Mooney was awesome for us. Loved having him. I know he went through a lot of stuff this year. I was really impressed and earned a lot of respect with how he handled himself. I think it'll be good for him to get a new, fresh start, especially
yep,
some stuff that he went through this year. The Colts are getting a really good person, a very talented corner. And that was really cool to hear. As well as Kevin O'Connell saying the same similar things, obviously not the tragedy part, about Cam
right.
Bynum. He was like, man, we wanted Cam Bynum, but we have pretty good safeties there. It's a position that we have a lot of depth at. So we had to kind of painfully move on. But I mean, I asked one question about Cam Bynum, and Kevin O'Connell talked for almost 2 minutes about this guy, just how much he loved
Yeah,
him. And the stuff that stood out to me about that, Jim, was like just the versatility. He was like, he said he can be deep safety. He can be, kind of like your nickel. He can come up and be like a linebacker if you need him to. He said, and then the part that really stood out to me was like, when you get in close quarters, he was like, he can do it all. When you get down to the red zone, plays and things like that, when you need to stop, he's so versatile that you can kind of put him anywhere and you will succeed because of that. And having been a cornerback previously, he has the cornerback skills, and so they were really high on him in Minnesota. So this isn't like a gimmick where, oh, that's just the funny guy who makes a play every now and then and dances.
Yeah,
No, he's a legit player. And to hear that from, again, opposing coaches now, previous head coaches, and most times coaches aren't going to like, rag on a player but again, you could tell there was genuine, not just lip service. Oh, you're getting a good young man and a hard worker, which I'm always, that's a red flag. If I ask you what I'm getting in a player and you mention, oh, he's a hard worker and he's a good dude, I'm like, he must can't play that well because something would tell you about his play style will stand out. And so to hear Kevin go that long about that guy was encouraging. So your thoughts on, you know, just what their coaches had to say about how they would fit here in Indianapolis.
no, it's exciting. I mean, it has to be exciting for Colts fans to know that they're getting not only high character guys, which I think we kind of knew. I think
Yeah.
with Travarius Ward, is particularly we knew, and I think with Cam Bynum, the way he was beloved by teammates for being the celebration guy and all that stuff, it seemed like we kind of knew that. But you're right; it was nice to get confirmation. Um, Particularly on Bynum, because I don't think there's any question about Ward's talent. I mean, like you've written it and we've seen it, and I think Ted Wynn said it. Like when that guy's at his best, he's a top five. Like he can be a top five corner in the NFL, cover corner. He's that good. Um, but to hear about Bynum, because Bynum wasn't really considered that level of player not that long ago, and I think he's come along quite a bit toward the end of his rookie contract, especially these last couple of years. So to hear Kevin O'Connell kind of rave about him and the way he fits. In Brian Flores' system, being able to do everything and be scheme versatile, like they really changed things up. If you remember in Minnesota, like the Brian Flores wasn't the plan initially for Kevin O'Connell. They had a very different idea of what they wanted their defense to be, and it didn't go accordingly. Essentially, to say they were in more of the. I think they were doing more of the uh, like some of the Rams stuff that they were doing a few years
Mm-hmm.
back. I blanking on the name that I wanted to come up with there. But anyway, they pivoted to a guy like Brian Flores, and I think that brought out the best in Cam Bynum we saw over the last couple of years. And that's
Yes.
got to be music to the ears of people with the Colts. Again, Lou Anarumo isn't. Don't get me wrong. Lou Anarumo's not Brian Flores. He's not going to do that many crazy things, but he is going to ask his players to do a lot of different kinds of things. And the fact that Bynum shined when that was what was asked of him is super encouraging.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, this is what they envision with Luanarumo, and you have to give him the players to do so. So getting two very versatile defensive backs in the prime of their career, playmakers, ball hawks, and then not to mention Kenny Moore's already on the roster. That
Right.
secondary is big. We talked about clashing with Chris Ballard. When we got to the front seven, that's when I got into the Samson Ebelcom talk. And he's like, "Man, James, you're really kind of hard on Samson Ebelcom." I'm like, "Look, man, I understand you believe in him, but he's going to be 30, coming off an Achilles tear." And this is where maybe I'm just a changing person, Jim. I went to Florida and I'm coming back and I'm seeing the light. I'm feeling levity in my steps now. But no, I didn't include this in the piece, which is I guess good. We have the pod. It wasn't like a huge deal, but he was saying he believes that Samson Ebukam can still be an effective player for them. And I was like, well, do you think he can be the same player? And he's like, we'll have to see. But I think what he was kind of hinting at, and if I'm reading this correctly, was he may not be the player that he was, but we believe that he can still be really good for us if the other guys kind of step up. And I think the biggest thing is on Latu. They're banking
Yeah.
on
Oh, for
Latu
sure.
being a dude, which makes sense. You don't draft him number 15 overall if you don't expect him to be like a really great dynamic player. But I think in the ideal situation, and we know how those situations go in the NFL, it's like they never go that way. So you got to get some depth there, which they mentioned. But ideally, Latu would step up and break out. And then maybe Sampson isn't a 10 sack guy or a 9.5 sack guy, but he can get you six, get you seven, and be sort of productive. And maybe he isn't who he once was, which again, 2 years ago, he was a leading sack guy for the Colts, the leading sacker. But he wasn't that last year because he was out. And so when I
Yeah.
heard him kind of break it down like that, like, oh, he can give us the same level of energy, or he can still be productive, he can still help out. I was like, okay, I kind of see the vision. I don't know if I'm fully on board with it because you could have saved a lot of money and maybe invested it elsewhere to get another defensive end in there instead of the guy coming off the torn Achilles. But maybe it's the fact that he tore it so early last year in training camp. That's a part of the factor when it comes to the recovery. And again, going into his final contract year, maybe not expecting him to be what he once was, but still being effective. I can kind of see the vision there. So I wasn't as harsh afterwards. And again, Samson Evercom, if you're listening to this, it ain't personal. I've seen the
Yeah.
movie before with Achilles. And so I'm just curious about that, and maybe your thoughts, Jim. 'Cause I can see you kind of like smirking. Weigh in, my brother.
It's Chris Ballard. He has I feel like he wants to believe in these guys that they can recover from these devastating injuries past their prime. Like he's done this before. We've done this before. We've done this with Eric Fisher. We've done this with other guys who were
I know, man.
significant
I
injuries.
know.
He's like, it's gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine. And it's like, it's not fine. They're not gonna be fine. But to your point, they're not expecting him to play a huge role this year. He's not going to probably be a starter this year for them. If he can come in as a situational pass rusher, I get that. He can be that. He'll have some familiarity with Charvarius Ward. They overlap in San Francisco for a minute, so
Right.
there's some of that too. Maybe I don't know a lot about Ebukam as a person, but maybe he's a high character guy. Maybe he's
He
helping
is.
guys like Quiddy
No, he
Pay
is.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and Leatu Latu develop. So there's a reason to keep him in the building for that reason. Um, and I think Chris Ballard, in his heart, and I mean this in the best possible way, like he's a good person. I don't think he wants to cut a guy because they're hurt. I think he wants to believe that they can come back and contribute and help. And so if if you're playing Madden, you cut the guy and you move on, right? Like, but if
Yeah.
you're
I'm
you're
like, dang,
dealing
am
with
I a
a
bad person now? Like, dang,
no,
Jim.
no, it's just you're
I'm
looking at
joking.
it. You're evaluating from the way you should. Like the best thing for the Colts roster might be to cut him and move on. But maybe Chris Ballard is seeing it from the person point of view, is saying the best thing is we give him a place to recover and rehabilitate while he helps our other pass rushers develop and grow. And we'll hope for the best. And it's not a huge amount of money that they're paying him. It's not like they had to do like with Braden Smith, where it was like, okay, you gotta either restructure that contract or he's got to go because like there's no way this is gonna work. And they restructured the contract. With Ebukam, the money isn't so crazy that you can't hang on to him. So I get it. It's not my favorite decision, but given all the things that you said about how they're going to plan to use him and then the type of guy that you say that he is, I get it. It's not my favorite, but I get it.
I get it. Which, and Samson is a really. I mean, he seems. I don't know these guys like on a super deep personal level like that. But he is someone that I've had many conversations with. Went out to Bloomington actually last year when he does a meet and greet after he had tore his Achilles and signed some autographs, talked to him about his progress. He was saying, I want to get back this season. If we're in the race, I'm going to try to come back this season. Obviously, that didn't really happen because the Giants game happened and they were out of it, pretty painfully. But I'm curious to see how he reacts to just the recovery and the role and things like that. Another thing on the offensive line front was the plan at right guard. And little newsy tidbit from Shane Steichen, because I know some fans asked me this. And I was like, all right, well, good on. I believe it might have been Joel or somebody was asking, hey, could Braden Smith move inside to right guard from right tackle? And Steichen very quickly said no. Well, he didn't say no definitively. He was like, hey, he's a tackle. And I was like, okay. That means either you're going to try to move Matt Gonzalez inside, which Steichen, I threw it out there. He was like, it's a possibility, but it wasn't like it was this thing that's going to happen. It didn't seem forthcoming. It seems like they're going to evaluate that and other possibilities as well. But him or Ballard, they're pretty vague on right guard, which leads me to believe, Jim. I know you've been kind of on this train pretty early. Like they might go offensive like linemen, like on the first in the first round.
Yeah,
Seriously,
it's a
like
sneaky big need. It
that's
is.
what I'm saying. And I wouldn't hate it. Like
No.
hypothetically speaking, if you get to 14, and let's just say Warren and Loveland are gone, or you don't feel like maybe Loveland is a guy you want to take at 14 because he's more of like a receiving tight end, maybe doesn't block as well, whatever. Do you trade back and then recoup some draft capital and then hit your offensive line hard? Because that right guard spot, I'm like, man, this is the one thing that they've been pretty tight-lipped on this compared to other positions, and I'm like, okay, that leads me to believe. And anytime they try to downplay a position, like really downplay it, and it's not painfully obvious like a tight end is, that's usually the one I'm like, okay, that's the one I need to be focusing on and kind of brushing up on who it could be, because I could totally see them trading back, let's just say from 14 to 18 or something like that, and drafting a right guard seriously
No,
to bolster that offensive line.
I've been preaching all offseason. Build like the Eagles.
Look, and
Build like
I've
the
been
Eagles.
walking past your church every podcast. I'm not now. I'm like I might be walking in because I mean
Build
you're
like the
right.
Eagles, man. I
Yeah.
build like the Eagles. Draft put offensive line. Listen, when you said trade back and draft an offensive lineman, it was like, oh, so trade back, draft an offensive lineman, and use one of those picks to trade for Dallas Goedert.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go. You figure your offensive line out. You finish the tight end spot. again, you can always draft one in the second or third round too. But I do again, I am all for taking a tackle and or guard or somebody who can play both.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of those linemen. I've been looking through Dane Brugler's stuff. The Beast is coming out next week, by the way, so people look forward to that. Beast Day is
Yes.
next Wednesday. It's going to be great. But there are a lot of offensive linemen in this draft who have the kind of inside outside versatility. Guys who played tackle in college who might not stick there in the NFL, might want to play guard in the NFL. But again, we've seen with a guy like Braden Smith, they thought he was definitely going to be a guard. He ended up being a very good right tackle, kind of overcame the lack of arm length and was very good there. So there's a lot of guys who can kind of fudge it and do both. So the Colts might just be best off taking the best offensive lineman they can find in the draft at 14 or trading back and saying, okay, we got somebody in the pipeline. We don't have to start. We could start him right away if he wins the job or not. Create competition, but ultimately, man, get talented young offensive linemen. It's having Jim Harbaugh. It was Jim Harbaugh. I think said it last year with the Chargers. Offensive line is the only position you can really draft that helps everybody. It's the only position you can draft. It helps the
Ah,
quarterback. It
good
helps the
point.
running back. It helps the receivers because the quarterback has time to throw it to him. Like it's a cliche, but I love it. Like it is the only position where you can draft that it helps everyone. So I will
Yes.
never fault anybody for drafting an offensive lineman. I love that
Yes.
idea.
And the other newsy thing from this was that Danny Pinter and Tanner Bortolini will be competing for the starting job, which, again, Danny said that when he re signed and we talked to him after he had signed his deal. And I think this just kind of confirms it, which makes sense to me because before you don't want to just hand the keys. It's similar to Anthony, who was just starting out. Like you probably don't want to hand the keys to the guy right away. I know Tanner started some games last year, looked pretty good in them, but just make him earn it, and then kind of bleeds into this conversation of competition and wanting it and having some competitive fire within your roster and just that uncomfortability, like that healthy, uncomfortable feeling of not having stuff just solidify right now
Yep.
is a good thing for a young offensive line competition. So that's a big thing as well. We talked about linebacker a little bit. We trust Chris Ballard when it comes to that position and drafting there or adding there because he's done it pretty well in the past. And those were, I guess, that kind of recaps a lot of the bigger conversations around the team. A bit of not surprising, but I was told that they will have joint practice this year, which is on brand with what they've done under the Chris Ballard regime, and they've done it every year with the exception of the COVID year in 2020. But every year they've
Right.
had joint practice. That will continue. The team is to be determined from what I have learned. However, it adds another layer, Jim, to this QB competition because now you talk about reps, live reps, and other opponents. Like I've heard many coaches, and I believe Shane might have said this himself. Like the joint practices are a little bit more beneficial in their eyes than the preseason games because you get to manipulate the scenarios. You get to kind of hey, we're gonna go red zone here, 15 minutes. Then we're gonna go, full length of the field drives. Then we're gonna go punt. Like all these different things allow you to kind of put your quarterbacks, in this case, your quarterbacks in positions where they have to respond. And so there will certainly be whoever it ends up being, the joint team. It'll be some eyes that day, Jim. And every joint practice has a lot of media members there, but your boy will be there very early those days, and I'm sure we'll be writing off of those. And you'll be editing stories about what Anthony did, what Daniel Jones did,
Yeah,
because it's going to matter.
you'll be tracking quarterbacks. So, you're right. They're hugely important days, and they give you a good insight into not only what the Colts are thinking, but what other defenses think of them. I think the Bengals were pretty vocal
Yes, good point.
last year about what they didn't see from Anthony Richardson, and maybe they were right about it. Like I said, we'll find out. But I think getting the exposure against real defenses in training camp is, like you said, it can be more valuable in the preseason games where things are kind of vanilla and you're not really seeing as many of the things that you're gonna the teams are really trying to practice in training camp. So I'm with you. I think it'll be exciting. It'll make the whole preseason a lot more exciting than a typical preseason.
Exactly. And okay, last couple of housekeeping items. We have Frank Reich reuniting with Andrew Luck out in Stanford. He's going to be the interim coach for the Cardinal, who are now the GM of that program is now Andrew Luck. And I was thinking about this when I watched a clips of the interview that I saw when they announced Frank Reich, and obviously those two were together in Indianapolis for some time. And I believe the last year Andrew Luck played was with Frank Reich. Um, I was thinking, Jim, like of the multiverse with Spider-Man, and I'm like, wow, so many different timelines. We're in the one where, I don't know, 34-year-old Andrew Luck is the GM of a 35-year-old Andrew Luck is the GM of a college team, and Frank Reich is his coach. Instead of those two still being in Indianapolis, winning playoff games together. Like, I mean, it's
It's
a happy
wild.
moment. I'm happy for Frank. Very nice guy and well respected and things like that. And obviously, it didn't work out here in Indianapolis, but I'm never going to be like mad at a guy who didn't get it right here. Hell, go
No,
do
yeah.
what you love. Hopefully, you succeed at it. But man, Jim, it's hard to think of what if. Like you were here
No,
when
I mean,
Andrew was here, I believe, right?
yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. I thought I was there for the 3 weeks before he retired. I was covering the team. I
It's
was there. I mean,
crazy.
I was in Indy for long before that, but I was only
Right.
covering the Colts for 3 weeks before he retired. So yeah, it was a wild time. No, I really thought. I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but like when I took the job, Zach Kiefer and Stephen Holder, we were walking to training camp, and they're like, "Man, this is a good beat. Like, it's good guys here. It's a real stable organization. Everything's going in the right direction. They got a quarterback, they got a coach. Everything's great." And then all hell broke loose. So no, it's crazy, but I am happy for Frank Reich. I've always like I'm not afraid to share that. I've always respected him quite a bit as a human and as a coach. Frankly, I think he's a good
Mhm.
coach. I know things didn't work out with the Colts, but I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good person. I'm very happy that he's reunited with Andrew Luck in Stanford. I think they're going to do well. I mean, I don't. He's never coached. I don't think he's ever coached. You know, he's never been the head coach of a college football program, so that could be an adjustment for him. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'll be rooting. I'll be rooting for them. It's an interesting story, so it'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely. And then the biggest talk, non-Colts related from the combine, was the tush push. I mean, there's other storylines. The Aaron Rodgers,
Yeah, yeah,
will he here? Won't he go to the Steelers? They're like flirting publicly, but they won't commit to each other. It sounds like me in high school. And then I would also say the Trey Hendrickson stuff is interesting. His kind of public spat with their front office and their brass over his contract and trying to get an extension done for the purposes of this podcast. Did a little bit of digging. I don't get the sense that the Colts are really in on that or trying to get him. And it sounds like, the Bengals are willing to kind of play hardball with Hendrickson to a certain degree. And I mean, this is not me saying this or reporting, like their brass is saying this.
yeah, yeah.
And so for some of the Colts fans who are like, hey, would they continue to this crazy defensive offseason by adding Trey Hendrickson? I would not hold my breath on that. But the other thing beyond those like team related things was like league related is the tush push, Jim. I was there for Roger Goodell when he talked about it. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being bamboozled or hoodwinked because they keep saying that this is an unsafe play and safety issues and things like that. But the moment he said, "Oh, we don't have a lot of data for that," I'm like, "Then why are what?
Yeah, it
What are we
doesn't make
doing?"
any sense to me.
So the,
I listen. I'll be very succinct here. I hate the tush push. It drives me crazy. I don't. It's just not a fun thing to watch. That said, stop it. Don't eliminate it. Don't make it illegal. It's ridiculous. Like I said, I hate that the fact there's no data that says there's injuries. There's not. I mean, I haven't seen it at least. If you don't like it, stop it. That's how I feel about it.
yeah, and it sounds like it's been tabled for now. It sounds like it's pretty split right now. They'll revisit it in May, so we will have a decision on that come before the end of the offseason. So maybe the touch push will. I don't know. Maybe it dies with the Eagles Super Bowl run, and if that's the case, then the Eagles, hey, that's a sacrifice they're willing to pay 10 times out of 10 to win it all. But yes, I agree, Jim. If you don't like it, stop it. And it was just funny to hear like the war of words between certain teams. Obviously, Shane's on the Philadelphia Eagles side of keeping it in football because he was a coach in Philly, and he's gonna have Nick Sirianni's back there. But then you have Matt LaFleur from the Green Bay, who their team put the proposal in to ban it, and they're like, it's not a football play, it's not safe, and so it was just funny that like wow, I think Diana Rossini was saying it. We had like this, we're going to this resort and we're having all these very serious meetings with very important people. And, I was sitting in a hallway where like, Jerry Jones walked by me and Woody Johnson and, the Jaguars owner and all these people are walking by me. I'm like, wow, this is like the richest guy in the world. Or this is the guy that, these are some of the richest people in the world. And one of the most overused phrases that they used during this was, just, yeah, I mean, just tush push. Like you have billionaires sitting around a table talking about the tush push, Jim. So we can end it on that. But I just thought that was so funny to me. Like, wow, we're really getting to a point where, again, we travel all this way and we're arguing about grown men pushing each other's butts to
But
score. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you can't
true. It's
really
a
argue there. So
however many billion-dollar industry, and that's what we're arguing about. Yeah. So
exactly. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this podcast. We'll have some other things coming your way, I'm sure, fairly soon. But until next time, my friends, stay safe and we'll talk to you all very soon.